We're now just over a month away until The Bachelorette is back on our screens, and this week the final Bachelor GOAT episode came at us with Juan Pablo's season, featuring 2020's first Bachelorette, Claire Crawley. Now, before I went and looked at that whole season, I also did a video on all of Juan Pablo's Night 1, and when I rewatched it, I also got to rewatch the season preview. You know, the part where before the episode begins, or after it all ends, where Chris Harrison says, "This season on The Bachelor." Well, these previews are the most important part of sleuthing when it comes to a season of The Bachelor or Bachelorette, so I thought I'd take a look at Juan Pablo's season preview again, now that we know everything about the season, who the final 4 and final 2 were, who the final rose recipient was, who was in the drama, and of course what the storyline of the season ended up being. Because I talk a lot about how the people at The Bachelor will edit a preview to try and showcase certain people and frame a season. So, looking back with full knowledge of what happens will help us recognize those little things that editors do that are really difficult to spot when a season's just started. So, Juan Pablo's Night 1 gives us 2 season previews. The first, and slightly shorter one, starts the episode off, before we get into any intro packages or anything. The second comes at the end of the episode, after the first rose ceremony, and that preview's job is to hook us in to come back and watch week after week. So let's begin with that first bit of preview.
I'm happy. I'm on my way to find love, and I'm having a great time.
Wow. This is crazy.
Now, typically I've noticed that most previews in The Bachelor fall into 3 segments, kinda like a sandwich. There's an exciting beginning where we see fun adventures to exotic locations, sometimes an adrenaline-inducing one-on-one like rock climbing dates or the lead and someone else jumping out of a plane. Then we move into the drama. The cast members fighting or crying, or the lead saying something like, "My heart is broken," or "I don't know how I'm going to make this decision." Like this little bit of early preview that turns to this.
I can't wait to see what comes next.
So what are you proposing?
It's simple. Kill the Batman.
Now, all this drama is to show you that the season is going to have stakes. All that excitement and romance that starts off a preview is going to be put into danger, and there's also going to be just some fun drama you'll want to tune in for. Now, the final piece of the sandwich is usually the romance, and a preview will often end with something romantic to show you that the lead is going to find love, at least love to a certain extent. The interesting thing, however, about this season preview is that they kind of flip that order. There's the exciting part, then some romance, and then they put the drama last. And I'll talk about why that might be at the end of the video.
Make a wish. You throw it in the water.
God, I can't believe we're here.
I know.
Isn't it crazy?
Alright, now here we're navigating through some of the early exciting and romantic parts of the season before things turn to some drama, and then we've got some women highlighted. Here it was Renee and Andy. And I decided that through both season previews, I was going to count how many times each of the top 6 women appear to showcase how much more the important women are going to be put into a preview, because that's what the editors want us to see. And if you don't know, for this season, the top 6 are Charlene and Chelsea, who did not make it to hometowns, Renee, who was eliminated at the rose ceremony at hometowns, Andy, who took herself out at Fantasy Suite Week, Claire, the runner-up, and Nikki, the eventual winner. And when I say appeared or appearances, I mean clear appearances in these previews. A shot where we could tell who it is even without seeing the rest of the season. This shot right here is not a clear appearance, but we know that it's Claire. The reason we know that is because we've seen Juan Pablo take her on a one-on-one in episode 2 to a park in Malibu that has man-made snow.
I can't even imagine how much harder this is gonna get.
So we then get a segment of drama, with your typical contestants crying, and then the episode begins. So we're going to fast forward to the preview at the end of the episode, which has a very similar format, just longer. There's excitement,
Oh, this is so cool!
exotic locales,
This is like the coolest thing ever.
I want you to smile, and I want your cheeks to hurt.
some dates,
I want that undeniable chemistry and just a great love.
then drama.
Oh, God. It makes me sick. No one has ever dealt with this before.
And at this point, we now know most of the women as we would have just watched the first episode. So the editors are then going to string together the footage in whatever way you want, but if you followed my channel for a while now, you'll know that there's a certain way the editors want to do this and certain people that they want us to see. Primarily, the people that are going to play an important part in the season, and definitely the final 4 or 6. So I did the math and counted how many times each of the top 6 women appeared in the 2 preview segments, which ends up being about 5 minutes of previews. I also counted how many times contestants who didn't make it to the top 6 were highlighted to compare. So let's start with Chelsea, who was eliminated in the top 6, who only appeared clearly 2 times. Pretty low. She makes it into the previews the least of any of the top women, which makes a bit of sense when you compare her to the other woman in the top 6, Charlene, who gets highlighted 10 times. And the difference between Chelsea and Charlene as the season plays out is that Charlene is much more involved in the juicy drama, with her eventually leaving the show because she doesn't feel strongly enough for Juan Pablo. Then there's Renee, who was sent home at the Final 4 Rose ceremony. She's featured 5 times, which leaves the big 3. Andy, who also decides to leave the show during Fantasy Suite Week, she appears 12 times. And during the season, Andy makes a big splash when she leaves, pretty much calling out Juan Pablo as an a-hole. She also goes on to be the Bachelorette. Now next, I'm skipping over Claire to talk about Nikki, Juan Pablo's final pick. Nikki is featured only 5 times, which is surprising, right? But remember those shots I talked about that I wasn't going to count, where it wasn't clear who the woman was? Well, if you did count those shots, Nikki's screen time in the preview would more than double. Not to mention, a lot of her shots are something I'm going to start coining as high-value shots. Take a look at this. This is Nikki here on a date with Juan Pablo. This is a high-value shot because it's clearly a one-on-one and it's in an exotic location. Meaning, in all likelihood, this shot is probably from later on in the season. Of course, we know now that this shot is actually from Nikki's fantasy suite date, horseback riding in St. Lucia. The people at The Bachelor will always put in footage from exotic locations because the viewer needs to be drawn into the fantasy. A whirlwind romance where someone is swept off their feet in a beautiful location. It's the dream, right? So they put it in the preview, but they use this shot specifically because Nikki is looking away. It doesn't give away who Juan Pablo is actually with here. Now, in comparison, let's look at some low-value shots. So in addition to the top 6, I counted how many times anyone who didn't make it that far was featured in the previews, and for the whole shebang there were 17 times anyone outside of the top 6 was highlighted. And a lot of these moments are just quick shots of someone crying, shots of people still at the Bachelor mansion, shots with multiple people in them. Low value shots. For example, here's a shot with Chantel who's upset and she's still at the mansion. So this could be still from very early on. At worst, it tells me nothing. At best, it's her upset because of drama or feeling like she's going to get eliminated early. Not much information. Now, finally, let's move on to Claire. Claire is highlighted in the previews a whopping 20 times. Far more than anyone else, and even more than all the women who don't make the top 6 combined. So why is Claire, the runner-up, so much more featured than Nikki? Well, it all speaks to how this season's storyline plays out, at least in comparison to your quote, typical season, which is that the lead, Juan Pablo, ends up becoming a sort of villain. Again, all the details on that you can check out in my season recap video. But in my opinion, Claire is actually the most important person in this season. At least that's what the editors might be thinking. Because the producers knew at that point we were probably going to turn on Juan Pablo because, well, during the season all the women did. And when it comes down to it, who turns on him the most? Who is hurt the most? Claire.
I thought I knew what kind of man you were.
Okay.
what you just made me go through, I would never want my children having a father like you.
Okay.
And so Claire becomes arguably the most important player in the season. Well, that isn't Juan Pablo. And Nikki has to take a back seat because their love story is tainted by everyone else's dislike of Juan Pablo. And so, in the eyes of an editor, Claire's now the person who's not only involved in the most important parts of the season, like her and JP hooking up in the ocean late one night, but she's the person that they want us to recognize the most, no matter what your opinion of her becomes at the end of the day. This is also why I think the previews end on a dramatic note instead of a romantic one, because this season quickly becomes more about drama and a dislikable lead than it does about rooting for Juan Pablo to fall in love. So, in summary, we can see that in this preview, overall, the women who contribute most to the storyline of the season are the ones who are highlighted the most and given the most high-value shots. But that doesn't mean that the most highlighted person is going to be the final pick. Still, we can pretty safely formulate a top 6 from this information, and pairing that with other previews as well as how Night 1 goes, is how we can start to formulate how the season is going to end up and potentially who a final rose pick might be. And I also want to mention that Night 1 can help a lot too. Like Charlene was highlighted so often in this preview, but seeing how lukewarm she was to Juan Pablo Night 1...
I guess I thought that I would feel more of this, like, insta chemistry than I did.
might make you think twice about putting her in your final 2. And really, getting it down to that final 2 is what this sleuthing is all about. So that's it for this video, looking back and dissecting Juan Pablo's season preview now that we know how it turns out. I hope you enjoyed this video, and be sure to like and subscribe for more as we gear up for the new Bachelorette season. So until next time, Bachelor Fan Take, out.
I can't wait to see what comes next.
So what are you proposing?
It's simple. Kill the Batman.